a policeman was sitting on the curb crying his eyes out, bawling, hysterical. And I just went up to him and I put my hands on his shoulders and I said, "What is happening? What's wrong? What is happening?" And he just said, the babies, all the babies are dead. And I said, what do you talk? What? And he couldn't talk. And my cameraman is just taping as much as he can. And I'm on the phone with my boss at NBC Connecticut. And I'm yelling, "Send every single person to Sandy Hook Elementary School right now. Something's happened." So I think there was, I think there's a shooting. And I spent the next 6 months covering that story, and I did TV all day. I did hours of TV. We obviously never went back to regular programming because it was the biggest story, obviously, in the world. And I was standing the next morning next to literally every news outlet you've ever heard of was at Sandy Hook Elementary. And I remember going, this is going to be a story that I will never forget, and also will change me as a person, which it did. And in a way, covering that story has made me so much better at my job, from just the simple idea that I get to cover sports now, and I cover something that's entertainment and fun. And while there's a serious nature to it, I get it. There is nothing that I will cover in the NFL that will ever come close to what I did at Sandy Hook Elementary School that day.
Welcome to the Raw Facts podcast. Everyone, I'm your host and producer, Ben Arthur, joined by a special guest, one no other than ESPN's Dianna Russini. She's one of their top national reporters. She's also a host for ESPN, one of the best in the business at what she does. Dianna, thank you so much for joining the show. How's your off season been?
Well, first of all, thank you for that very kind intro. I love the fact that you're the producer and on-air talent. I feel like we're in a time period right now where versatility is everything. So the fact that you're able to do it all is really cool. And versatility is essentially what I've been focused on this summer. I'm new to the motherhood space. So I have 2 babies under 2, and my off season, it's been about really just staying alive. That's my approach every day of how can I get through today. So that's, I battle so much this time of year. As much as work can wear you down and we all get tired, if you love what you do, you feel really empty without it. And this is the time of year where I'm not around the players. I'm not around the game as much as I'd like to be because everyone's off. And I feel a little empty, even though I love my family. We've had a really nice summer. This is probably the first season in a while where I am really ready to get back. Like, I can't wait for week 1 to just get here.
And I'm curious, Dianna, just kind of going off of that, being a mother of 2 under 2, how has maybe motherhood shaped kind of your approach to doing your job now as compared to maybe when you were younger and kind of at the start of your career, kind of a new stage of your life? How has that maybe impact the way you go about your job?
I had no idea that motherhood would actually change me as a journalist. I figured as a person it would, because it's a whole nother experience and a new step and a lot of growth. But as a reporter, it has changed my relationships, first and foremost, because I feel like I'm now part of this club of parents. And a lot of people in the NFL are parents themselves, whether it's players, coaches, agents. Everyone can relate to the parenting space. And I never knew about it until I became it. And I can't tell you how many people in the league, most of our conversations now are about parenting, whether it's sharing stories, sharing photos, telling funny stories about the newest thing that's happening. And I love hearing about people's children now. And I never did before. I thought it was, because I couldn't relate. I have a big family and I'm a very family oriented person, but you really don't get it until you experience it. So I love the type of reporter I've developed into since I had Michael and Joseph, because it has changed my approach in conversations. It's changed the way I even work, the process, right? Because my time is different. I don't waste as much time on the dumb things in media, in football, and just in general. The stuff I used to probably get tied up in, I don't have the time to really worry about it anymore. And I feel like it's mentally made me a healthier person. And really, when it comes to covering football and having these really amazing relationships I've been able to develop over the years, I feel like players treat me differently since I've become a mother. There's just a different approach from them, and I've seen it, and I can't really put my finger on it. But I can tell you it's been beneficial. It's been people, Lamar Jackson is probably the best example. He was so excited when he saw my belly. He's like, "Oh my God, you're going to be a mom." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, you're very excited about this." Oh, and it was really cool that like he cared enough. And, since I had both my kids, I only had them 13 months apart. I constantly have people reaching out and just checking in on them, or it's really been a cool experience, and I really like how it's helped.
And Dianna, I was doing some research on you, and I saw that in high school you were all state in 4 different sports, which is insane in itself. Like I think was what, basketball, softball, track and field, and soccer. And so I'm curious, what have you taken from each of those sports that has helped you in your personal life and or your career, like maybe from each one of those sports that's kind of been unique, that's kind of helped you to this point?
Well, first of all, you would not have to Google that if you watch ESPN, because I bring it up on every show. Because look, I have no clout with these analysts who all played at a high level.
Yeah.
So I peaked in high school. I played women's soccer, a Division I at George Mason, which is I think a pretty good accomplishment. I played all 4 years, but I really peaked in high school. That's where I was very good at sports. And so that's the only juice I have around these guys. Is like, yeah, I was all state in a lot of different sports, guys. Yeah, look, I was around sports my entire life. I love to compete, and my parents picked up on that pretty quickly when I was younger, going up against my brother and everything. And he's had a really strong influence on me in that regard of just being tough and hard and relentless. And it's so funny because I look back on the type of athlete I was, and I haven't really changed much in terms of how I approach reporting. I use so much of those skill sets I learned in each of those sports to help me develop and become the type of reporter I am now. And, I look at a sport like soccer, and that was my favorite from a team dynamic. My best sport was actually track. I was really fast. I was great at long distance. I think if I really committed to it, I probably would have been a top runner in the country in college, but I chose not to because I love being part of a team. So when that opportunity came in high school of, what do I want to do next? After talking to schools, I would have had a full ride pretty much anywhere. But I didn't want to run. I didn't like that feeling of all the pressure just on me. I wanted the help. I liked being with people and finding a common goal. And that's really why I like soccer so much. And I like the physical contact of that sport. And, endurance helps, right? Like of all the sports, soccer is the hardest when it comes to running. They used to put a tracker on me of how many miles I'd run in a game. And I think it's like 6 to 8 miles a game, which is like insane to think about now of how much I would run. And basketball, I wasn't good at all. Um, I wasn't. I'm still really close to my coach, and he says to me all the time, because he's also the high school football coach. He was just actually New Jersey Coach of the Year this past season. And he tells me that when he talks with his football players, he has used me as an example of the type of athlete he wants on his, part of his program. And it really wasn't about skill, it was about heart. And basketball for me was just showing up, being, doing whatever was asked of me, and really committing to it. So I was like a really good defender. So they'd always just mark me up on whoever the best shooter was. And I just would make her life hell. And that's what I became really good at. It was just like, here's your mission, go get it done. Softball to me was more, my family was a big baseball family. And we love the Yankees. My brother was a pitcher in college. My father played in the Little League World Series as a catcher. So I've just been around the sport so much. And I always just felt like I had to play it. And I was good at it. So I played third base, and third base in softball, as you know, you're really close to the plate. So I loved that challenge of it. It was scary. It was risky, right? Like you could get cracked in the face pretty quickly if you're not protecting yourself. So I kind of enjoyed the thrill of it. And I like the fact that my parents enjoyed when I played softball, because they loved the game so much. They understood it probably more than any of the other sports I played. And then track was just, my dad told me when I was a little girl, when I was 5 years old, I ran the mile fun run at school, and I won it. And I ran an 8:16 mile at 5, which is
Oh,
really
wow.
fast. I couldn't
Yeah,
do that now.
that's insane. Yeah. At 5.
And
Wow.
yeah, and I remember my dad picked me up from school, and the gym teacher walked me out because he wanted to tell my dad, like, your daughter just did something I've never seen before. She just broke a school record and probably more records around the area. And I remember I wore these little Keds. I didn't even have real Nike. I didn't have any shoes. My parents were from the Bronx. We moved to New Jersey. We didn't know anything about sports like that. And I remember in the car, my dad said to me, God gave you a gift, and it is your job to lean into that. And running is your gift. So you're gonna continue to do it because you don't want to waste that. And I just always kept that in my mind as I continued growing and playing sports, that like I was given this talent, so I want to keep leaning into it. And I actually kind of hated running. As much, it's so interesting, right? Like, why would I hate something I was so naturally good at? But it's almost like I was a masochist. It's like I like pain and challenge. I like to be, I like to struggle. And soccer was my hardest sport for me. I'm not naturally talented. At my touch on the ball wasn't very good. I didn't have the strongest leg, but I loved the sport so much. And I liked the fact that no one believed that I could be great at it. Everyone kept saying, go run track, go run track. So, I go through all the years of doing it. And, my grandfather was probably my biggest supporter. He was like, just go do it, and you're going to be great. And I did well. I did really well. And I love it. And all of I'm really proud of it too, not because of what I accomplished then, but because I learned how to lose. I learned how to work hard. I learned how to be disappointed. And I also learned how to win. I think that was probably my biggest takeaway, especially with track, because I was so natural at it. To win with class, and to also grow and improve when you're winning. I think that can be really hard, which you don't expect it. But I reflect back on it, and I was really lucky. I had good people around me to make sure I was humble and still working at the same pace I was working when I started.
And Dianna, what really stood out to me from what you were saying was like with soccer, like it was the one that you weren't naturally good at, and just kind of wanting that grind, right? Like wanting to really work at something, and become good, in spite of like kind of rejecting maybe your natural talent at something else, and really wanting to grind in this other sport. How do you think maybe that's translated into kind of what you're doing with ESPN covering the NFL now, just in terms of embracing the challenges and kind of taking those head on? How is that maybe translated to what you do now?
I think we work in a very competitive industry, and there's a lot of really accomplished, smart, talented people that do what I do. And I am a very self-aware person at this point in my life, just my age and just the experience. I know what I am, and I am not polished like Mike Greenberg. I am not as knowledgeable as a Scott Van Pelt. I don't have the relationships like a Susie Colbert. And I'm okay with all of that because I'm not trying to be any of them. Um, I have figured out that me being who I am, that relentless, hardworking, um, grinder, has helped me have success over the years. So being able to figure out what I'm good at, where I'm not, where I struggle, what my flaws are, and figuring that out has probably been the best key to having success, was seeing, all right, this is what works for me, this doesn't. And I picked a career that is similar to what soccer was for me. I could have been a news reporter. I was a news reporter before sports, and I was good at it, and I really liked it. And I could have stayed at a really good, New York City at one of the big networks and probably stood there. But I wanted to do sports because I'm passionate about it. It was natural to me, but also I knew that it was an outlet, an area, a field that didn't have a lot of women at the time. And this is going back 15 years ago. And I felt like this could be an area that I could really achieve well because I understood competition, athleticism. I understood the way it worked in the sports world because I had the experience as an athlete. And the transition was really seamless in terms of getting it. I figured out fast that I can connect with a player in 30 seconds because athletes speak the same language. There's just an understanding there. Guys always know I played something. I've never had to be like, oh, I was an athlete. They get it.
Yeah.
And that was natural right out of the gate. And then over the years, I just had to figure out where I was good and getting information, building relationships, and really, I think being transparent has really helped guide me over the years to really help me land where I've landed now.
And Dianna, you mentioned kind of being a woman in this space, and I know the numbers have definitely grown in terms of women covering the NFL in recent years, but it's still, as we know, kind of a minority in terms of NFL coverage. I'm wondering if in your experience, have you ever felt like you've been treated differently or held to a different standard because you are a woman covering the NFL?
Yeah, look, it happens. I think the audience is my biggest challenge. I think having the family that I have, they're a very blue collar, Italian, old school way of viewing women in sports, that it's actually helped me because I get their feedback on some of the stuff I would do and some of my reports. And I can see some of the areas where people are still challenged by women and talking about certain things. And, the most common feedback you'll get is, well, you never played this sport. And I say, well, look around this press box. Most of the people haven't played the sport. I'm probably the best athlete in this room.
Yeah.
Like I always get in the back of my mind. I think that I don't say it. I mean, sometimes I say it, but yeah, look, something that I am proud of is I find the players and the coaches to treat me as equal as the men at all times. I've never had a problem with a player or coach ever talking to me in a way that I don't know what I'm talking about, or judging me for being a female. In fact, I have found the opposite, where I have seen them go out of their way in terms of the knowledge of the game. Like they just assume I know everything, and sometimes I don't. That I'm like, oh, back it up, back it up. Like you need to go over the coverage with me again because of whatever. Or I didn't see that, or and look, I think that's because a lot of the players have been around it. Luckily, I think they've seen women out there and they respect it. I also think that in 2023 for a female in sports, and I constantly am preaching to younger reporters because I feel like that old lady that has to do it. But your credibility and your knowledge and your hard work is all you got. And with Instagram and TikTok, like there's a space. I get it. Like being cute and fun and pretty and all that. Like there's this pressure when you're a female that that's what you have to be. But I want to be the poster child, so to speak, or the example for so many of these women that if you work at it and you love it and you do it in a classy, credible way, you will have a really good career. If you think you're going to get traction wearing bikinis, you may. You're going to get traction, actually. I guarantee your Instagram is going to go up. But when it comes to longevity, covering this league, it's not going to work. You are giving yourself a shelf life. But if you can find a way to have your own voice, and be unique and get that respect from everyone around you in this business, I think you can last long. And that's where I've really put my focus in the last few years. And I'm so lucky that I have had the right people around me to guide me. That wasn't an original thought. No, yeah. I thought that was the way years ago too. I remember trying it a little. I was like, oh, it was so uncomfortable of putting myself out there. And now I've learned like knowledge, credibility. That's the way to go.
Yeah, that just kind of reminds me of kind of what something Adam Schefter had told me is like the work is going to speak for itself. Like there's all this kind of fluff and the sports media landscape is changing a lot, as we know, and everything going on with social media and whatnot. But the work is the work at the end of the day. And as well as
I saw Adam in the cafeteria in Bristol, Connecticut 7 years ago. And I was a Sports Center anchor at the time, but I really wanted to get into football. I've always loved the NFL. So I see the Adam Schefter, like getting some chicken salad thing. I'm like, oh my gosh. So I go up to him, I start talking to him. And I said, I really want to cover the league. How can you help me? Can you put in a good word for me? He's like, I can't really, he didn't know me from Adam, no pun intended. He's like, here's what I can tell you. This is all I know from doing this. The cream always rises. The cream always rises to the top. It's as simple as that. We've all heard the phrase. And every time Adam and I, reflect on kind of life, I always remind him of that. Like, you told me that years ago. And maybe I didn't know at the time that I didn't know how to get there yet. But it's the truth. If you put the work in, there's really no other way people can ever tear you down. And there's really no other way to do it. It doesn't last if you don't do it that way.
For sure. And Dianna, I'm curious. You've covered, hundreds, maybe thousands of stories at this point in your career. I'm wondering, what was the story you covered, or maybe the piece of news you broke, to where you maybe felt like you made it, or maybe kind of your most memorable kind of defining moment in your career, if you have anything that kind of maybe fits that mold.
I do. I wouldn't use the phrase made it because it's inappropriate for the story, but I would use the word, I would describe it as the moment I realized this job is actually really important. And it was when I was a news reporter. And I covered the shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary. And I was one of the first reporters on the scene. I was covering a JV basketball team's, they like won their league, like some really fluffy Friday afternoon sports story. And the news desk called me and said, "Can you go swing by Sandy Hook Elementary School? There was shots fired. We think it's just a hunter in the woods, though. It's probably nothing. Just go swing by and then, go back to your JV basketball team." And I remember being like, "Ugh, I don't want to go, but all right, fine. I'll go swing by." So me and my cameraman swing by, and it was chaos. It was something I've never seen before. It looked like a movie. People were running everywhere. Parents were screaming, crying. And I was there before the police tape even went up. So it was the raw moment of it all. And a policeman was sitting on the curb, crying his eyes out, bawling, hysterical. And I just went up to him and I put my hands on his shoulders and I said, "What is happening? What's wrong? What is happening?" And he just said, "The babies, all the babies are dead." And I said, What are you talking? What?" And he couldn't talk. And my cameraman is just taping as much as he can. And I'm on the phone with my boss at NBC Connecticut. And I'm yelling, "Send every single person to Sandy Hook Elementary School right now. Something's happened." So I think there was, I think there's a shooting. And I spent the next 6 months covering that story, and I did TV all day. I did hours of TV. We obviously never went back to regular programming because it was the biggest story, obviously, in the world. And I was standing the next morning next to literally every news outlet you've ever heard of was at Sandy Hook Elementary. And I remember going, this is going to be a story that I will never forget, and also will change me as a person, which it did. And in a way, covering that story has made me so much better at my job, from just the simple idea that I get to cover sports now, and I cover something that's entertainment and fun. And while there's a serious nature to it, I get it. There is nothing that I will cover in the NFL that will ever come close to what I did at Sandy Hook Elementary School that day. And for me, that was a defining moment in my career of just understanding the gravity of what my job was to that day, because people were tuning in to get the information, parents, the community. So from a serious aspect of all this, that was it for me. From a fun side of all this, for me, it was breaking my first big story. I was covering the then Washington Redskins, obviously now the Commanders. And I had this fantastic source on the team who, I don't know, I should probably just reveal my source at this point, because who cares? Just say it was D'Angelo Hall. Okay, so D'Angelo Hall was not nice to me, ever. Just hard. Those guys in the locker room, they just make your life hard. And I never knew what I did. So finally one day he comes up to me and he said, "You've got a lot to learn about the game. I can tell you don't know it." And I was like, "I know it." He's like, "Nah, you got to do your work." And something about it rang true to me. Like, I remember thinking, if that's what he thinks, then he's not the only player in the locker room that thinks I'm some dumb girl. So I better go figure out a way to get better. And I did. And I just started showing up more, asking more questions. I was actually more vulnerable about it, just saying what I knew, what I didn't know. Trent Williams, I remember, would stand in the corner with me and explain stuff to me. Pierre Garçon at the time, Robert Griffin III, like just Kirk Cousins, like these guys would just be awesome, just like coaching me up, so to speak. And so finally, D'Angelo Hall one day was like, "All right, you've grown, man. Like, you've gotten really good at this." And he's like, "I'm going to help you out one day." I'm like, "Yeah, whatever." What does that mean? So fast forward that off season, I get a text message and it's D'Angelo Hall. And he's like, literally, this is D'Angelo, because I never texted with him. So he's like, this is D'Angelo Hall. Deshaun Jackson is signing with the Redskins. You should report it. And I was like, I didn't know what to do. I'd never broken a story yet. So I was like, can you call me? Is this really D'Angelo Hall? So he calls me and he tells me, and I tweet it. And I remember being in my apartment and I was shaking, because if you don't get a story right, as you know, I mean, you're ruining your career. And I'd never broken a story. I didn't even know how to tweet it. Like, I should go back and look how I tweeted it. It was probably not good. And Adam Schefter retweets it. And I remember screaming on top of my lungs, like, oh my God, Adam Schefter retweeted me. And I printed out Schefter's, like, that it said Adam Schefter retweet, and it was on my fridge for like 2 years. And I just remember I went out to dinner that night. I had drinks. Like, you would have thought I broke the story of the year. Like, big deal. Deshaun Jackson signed to the Redskins. Like, so stupid. But I just remember feeling the thrill of it. And after that, I was like, I was addicted. I'm like, I want to be a newsbreaker. This is what I want to do. This is awesome. And so from there, I did it, and I try to keep doing it.
Dianna, I want to go back to the Sandy Hook situation real quick. What is it like in such a traumatic, I mean, traumatic event? What is it like to compartmentalize your personal, your human emotions, really strong emotions, with doing the job of being a news reporter? You're covering this massive event, but there's so much tragedy, sorrow. Take me kind of through what that was like for you, being able to just focus on doing the job, even if you may have had all these other thoughts going on in your head.
So it was December 14th. That was the day of the Sandy Hook Elementary. And I was a robot for that entire time. Like, I was interviewing parents that lost their children. I was interviewing siblings, teachers, police officers, EMTs. I never shed a tear. I never thought about it more than just, I had to get this on the air. I try to be very sensitive to it in my interviewing process, but I was in full reporter mode. And fast forward that summer, it's August. I'm sitting on my parents' deck having lemonade with my mom. And she was talking about getting her haircut. Like, I can remember it clearly, which, again, just very basic, normal day. I think I want to cut my hair shorter. And I just started bawling. And she's like, what's wrong with you? And I just let it all, every emotion, every feeling that I had, that I guess I was holding in, something triggered it. And I remember her looking at me, and she's really hard in general. She's really hard on me, but in the most gentle way. I just remember her putting her hand on my hand and saying, tell me more about it. Tell me more. Because she knew I needed to talk about it. And for whatever reason, that was the day I wanted to talk about it. And it felt so good to get it out. And I do think now that I'm a mom, I don't know if I would have been as robotic as I was. And, I don't think I would have had the ability to be as professional. Professional is not even the right word, truthfully. It was more just, it was a little callous, because I also didn't understand that love for a child the way I do now. And I remember having producers crying, and I remember thinking too, like, why are they crying? Like, they didn't even know these kids, like, so young, and just, you don't know. And one of the, bringing it back to being in the media and doing what we're doing, as a woman, I think in life, it's hard to get older, right? Like, what girl wants to be old? No one does. But I love the experiences now. Like, I love that I've been through it. I love that I got a couple wounds, some scars, some stories that I can share now to help me arrive to where I'm going here, and this journey has been so cool. Um, and it's funny, not funny, but I was just sharing at the league meetings with Albert Breer from Sports Illustrated. I'm not Sports Illustrated anymore. What is he now? MMQB.
MMQB, yeah.
And even Ian Rappaport, who's a competitor of mine, about Sandy Hook. We just naturally were talking about big stories we're working on for something. And I brought it up. They're like, wait, you were at, I said, yeah. They're like, how, like, what? I'm like, I know, it's crazy that that's part of my journey, but I am almost oddly proud of it too, because I do think it's made me better at what I'm doing. And um, it's helped me change my approach to a lot of things for sure.
Dianna, on a lighter note, going back to the Washington story that you broke, or the Redskins now Commanders story. Um, I guess now that you've broken, I guess, hundreds of stories since that point, I'm assuming. Do you ever like kind of lose that feeling of addiction, of like having like that massive scoop? Like, does that ever go away over time from that like first big story on the Redskins beat to now? How is maybe that those feelings and emotions evolved for you breaking news?
Yeah, nothing is ever like the first time you do it. The Deshaun Jackson story to me will forever be the most exciting story I've ever broken. Um, yeah, that one. I've had some trades that I like. I like the trade. Trades are the fun ones because they get such a reaction from fans. Like that's my favorite part about it is like I love the news where people are shocked by it. Like that's fun. Like especially when you've been sitting on it. Those are killer. Um, Adam is obviously a phenomenal insider and he's a great friend of mine and he's taught me so much about this process, so much. Just through example. Like sometimes you don't have mentors in your life like sitting there like teaching you how to do stuff. Sometimes just them being them, they become your mentors because you follow them and you see how they do it. Um, Adam and I are always collaborating and communicating. And I mean, I can't tell you how many text messages I send him that just say, "Do you think this is news?" Blah blah blah. Whatever it is, because sometimes that's hard too of figuring out like this is interesting to me. Would this be interesting to the fan? Would this be
Mhm.
interesting, you know, in just the landscape? And he's a great he's a great person just as a sounding board for me to just go, yeah, that's good. Tweet that or who cares? He's a really big I guess he's a driving force for me on don't put out the breadcrumbs, let them run, so to speak, right? So I very rarely will just say like, this team is interested in that player. Sometimes like now because it's quiet, like DeAndre Hopkins obviously is the big free agent along with Dalvin Cook. Like we're talking about teams interested in them. That's fine, but getting the signing before all the interest is the way to like you want the big one, and he's really been good with me with that on teaching me how to hold back because sometimes that's what it is too. You have so much info that you want to put out there, but you don't always want to put it all out there. A, because you don't want to tip the competitor off, but B, you don't want to mess up any of the process,
Mhm.
especially if to get the final result. So I love that in the entire process of going through it and screening it and the calls. Um, there's nerves that go with it no matter what. Like I could have the player on the phone with me while he's signing the deal and I still get nervous because it's my livelihood. It is everything I've worked for can go away very quickly if I get it wrong. And I've gotten stories wrong before.
Mhm.
Um and I've also, Adam and I messed up together where we thought stories weren't stories and we haven't reported it and they turned out to be
Mhm.
gigantic when someone else does it. Or we had a great example together. So it's free agency. And Adam and I are sitting together having lunch. and we're busy. We're by the way, when I say having lunch, that means we're just eating at the same time. We're not even talking to each other.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, I was like, look at this. Look what I just got from a source. And it was a physical, it was a list of players that Aaron Rodgers wanted the New York Jets to sign if he were to come to the Jets. This was before it became official.
Hmm.
And I'm reading the list to him. He's like, not really. He's not really saying much. He's like, he's like, don't report that. Like, I know, but it's kind of funny. He's like, did you say Odell's on that? I was like, yeah. He's like, maybe that's a story. I was like, don't you think it's a story that he has this like list? He's like, yeah, I guess it is. He's like, it's a wish list, right? It's like, yeah, it's a wish list. Not all wishes come true, though. Like he's like, yeah. He's like, put it out, whatever. It's so busy today. It's not going to get a lot of traction, but it'll be fun to talk about at some point. I said, yeah, let's do it. So I was like, he's like, here, write it like this. And I was like, all right, did it. So we both agreed that the way I tweeted it was like a fun but credible, responsible way to tweet it. Ben, my phone did not stop. I have never tweeted a story that got more reaction than that story, which I crack up. He's like, holy crap. I'm like, Sports Center's call. Every show's calling me. They're like, we need you on TV right now. We need you on the radio. We need you. I'm like, oh my God. If I knew this was going to do this, I definitely would not have reported it. So it's fun to just kind of navigate yourself and figure out what works. And I also have I like Jeff Passan and Adrian Wojnarowski. These are like two monsters in the game in their sports, and they're always weighing in on my reporting. Like they text me like, hey, here's a better way to say it, or great stuff, go more, go hard next time. Like it's great. It's a really cool collaboration among all the insiders.
Dianna, what is the fulfillment that you get out of your job on a daily basis? You mentioned how early on in the conversation how this is really entertainment, right? And it's such a contrast to like the example you gave, like with Sandy Hook and covering hardcore news. But what personal fulfillment do you get out of kind of the job you do right now?
For me, I love just being part of all the excitement and getting to know the league as well as I have years and being able to cover it and truly like the people I'm covering. Um, I can't tell you how many I'll just be driving with my husband or we'll be going for a walk with the kids. And I swear I say this. I'm like, if I cover the NFL, like it is such a dream of mine to be able to do this. And he always uses my life as an example when he talks to his team in his career, because he thinks it's so unique that I actually love what I do. He's like, you don't get, because he's in the corporate world. He's like, you don't understand. People don't love what they do. And there's something about football that brings joy, the drama of it. And the fact that I get to be the messenger to the fans, I love the role of it. I love the responsibility of it too. That people on Sunday morning before the games start want to hear what I have to say about the news I gather. I feel like I work for them. And I guess it kind of goes back to a lot of that athlete I was as a soccer player of, I always want to be the hardest working person out there. I want to be so ruthless and relentless. And it works in this field. It's actually exactly what I should be doing.
Dianna, this is kind of my last question, and thank you again for being on the show. That this has been fantastic. And this is kind of a big question, so go in whatever direction you want. But what has sports, covering sports, playing sports meant for your life and for your life journey?
My goodness, when I think about what has shaped me as a person, I want to name people, right? I want to think of places I've been, but truly the core of who I am has come from an extension of being an athlete and now covering it. And I think the strength that I have been able to build on, the muscle mentally, um, all stems from being an athlete and being around mentally strong people, that it has helped me be able to navigate parenting, navigate marriage, navigate my family. And I have been able to figure out how to overcome challenge. Um, because so much life is so hard. I feel like I never understood that as a younger person. I was, you're just so overwhelmed. You don't know what you want to do with your life. And now that I'm older and I've done a lot, I'm like, man, this thing called life is not easy. And if you can have that exposure to people who have been able to achieve, and it become contagious in a way, I feel like that is such an advantage. And sport for me, I think, has really become the foundation for me of who I am, and how I make decisions. Even it really all comes full circle. And whenever I talk to younger journalists, I always try to share that if they have any athletic background, if they played sports themselves, to lean into that, because that's going to help you cover this game so well, and cover any sport really. And so I guess for all the things that I love in my life, sports is probably it's in my top 3 for sure.
Well, awesome. Thank you, Dianna. Thank you guys for listening to the Raw Facts podcast, to this episode. You guys can subscribe to the show on YouTube at the Raw Facts podcast, and you could also follow the show on Instagram and Twitter. Dianna Russini, appreciate you so much, and best of luck this NFL season.
Thank you so much for having me. This is so cool, and I can't wait to keep hearing other people's stories, because there's always so much more to people than what you just see on TV.
Absolutely. All right. Appreciate you guys.